All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to wait a few more minutes. We got some members didn't realize it was in this committee room, and so they're hopefully making their way back up.
The clerk is going to be here. I'm good. I waved at you. You didn't see me. I waved at you. You didn't see me. That's all right.
See y'all.
You didn't invite me to the party. Aren't you giving the party?
Sunday night?
Monday night. Monday night.
Well, she can join.
No.
Nay.
He knows me right to bed. That's my friend.
I'm not sure they do a lot of good because
You know, Jessica, come on, join us. Jessica invited me.
That's what I thought. Maybe a couple of them had gone down. There's a meeting in 200. Who's in 200? Oh, yeah. Are they giving out free samples to everybody down there or something? The reason my guys won't make it up? Is that the reason nobody's showing up?
She said, I said, sweetheart, you've been around.
I love it.
All right, guys. Danny, can you hear me? Chairman, can you hear us? Can you hear me now? Okay. All right. We just want to make sure we got everybody else, I think, that's on Zoom. Thank you all for joining us. And sorry, it was kind of a short notice on the meeting. And I know we did make plans, but we tried to change the time for everybody to get here to make it a little more convenient. But it's inconvenient, I know, when we got stuff in our district. Let's get started off. Representative, you want to lead us in a word of prayer?
May we all bow our heads. Oh, Heavenly Father, it's once again that we come before your throne of mercy. Father, we're thanking you for all that you have blessed us with, Father. Father, as we get ready to ponder on the labor force in Alabama, Father, we ask that we keep in mind the people that we serve. And Father, that we will lift them up and that we will make our state it even better, Father. We pray for each member on this committee collectively and in whole in their households. And Father, we just want to say thank you for Thanksgiving for 365 days of the week. We give you glory and praise for all that you have done for us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. We've got a huge problem in this state, as you well know, and everybody who's here knows that we have dropped to 43% and still falling on the exit of people that are of age and qualified to work. So only 57% is participating in our workforce. Dropping to 43rd is not acceptable at all. When in 1819, we were up in the top 5, and we're dropping that fast. And everybody had the same playing field when COVID hit. Some fared a lot better, and I don't know that we can blame it on COVID or we can blame it on a lot of things. You know, we've identified and heard from you that a lot of things that we're taking note, and a lot of it will be legislated that we're going to change. A lot of it's going to be community driven. A lot of it's just get off your lazy butt and get off the couch and let's get back into the workforce. But whatever the case may be, like I said before, we're not going to leave any stone unturned. And I don't care how small that little group is, we're going after them. And we're going to get whatever we can do. It's biblically to be in the workforce. We're going to get into the churches. We're going to get into the community. God puts us here for a reason, to worship him and to teach our kids to work and to worship. And so we're going to take that approach, and we're going to take every approach that we can take. I appreciate the speaker giving us giving me the opportunity to serve on this, and I appreciate everybody that we've got on this commission. It's different backgrounds. Everybody here is a hard worker and have taken an interest. Whether they're here or not, they wanted to be here, and we've been talking, we've been communicating a lot. We had a meeting this weekend that was on our caucus, but this is not a political, this is not a Republican, this is not a Democrat, this is not a white, this is not a black, this is not a Hispanic. This is an issue for our state as a whole, and we're going to address anything that we can do. Whether it's the benefits, people are getting too many benefits, maybe they don't need them, maybe they do need them, but when you reach a point in a state that you're 15% poverty or reaching that, it's a problem. It's a real problem. We've addressed some things that we've identified looking at minimum wage. We're addressing some illegals, or maybe a dress to come in to the colleges. That's something that we passed in 10. There's no need to hide around anything that we're working on. I want everybody to know, because we've got to have the tools in the toolbox from everybody in the audience and everybody on this commission to be able to solve the problems. I'm not saying we're raising raising the minimum wage. I'm saying we're addressing it. And that's going to be up to the leadership. It's going to be up to this body, and it's going to be up to the speaker. But we're going to identify the reasons, and that's what y'all are here for today. I want to hear from everybody how to solve the problem. Now, I know there's some people that are interested in speaking about what they've got to offer, and I'm okay with that too, as far as a product is concerned. But we'll get started. I appreciate everybody being here, but it is a bigger concern that I think we've ever had in this state. And it's because it's going south. And if we don't address it, we've got to stop it. The speaker wanted to change it by 3%. I told this commission we've got to do it by 5%. So I think we can do it. It's going to be a long boat to turn around. It's nothing that's going to happen overnight. But every chip of that tree that we take out of is going to be a chip that we can work with and make it work. But we'll get started here. Let's see who we got first. Kenneth Harris, Department of Labor. Oh, no, with Department of Public Health. I'm sorry.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Chairman, members of the board, I'm delighted to be here to talk a little bit about the Alabama Department of Public Health. I'm the workforce director for Alabama Department of Health. And before I get into it, I just want to give you a little overview about us. We currently have approximately 3,000 positions that could be staffed, and we're currently sitting at I believe the last number I looked was 2,667. So we're about 330 people shy of being fully staffed. And, I'm going to talk about some of the barriers that we face and also what we're doing to help close some of that gap. But I do want to talk a little bit about, give us a little prompts for Alabama Department of Public Health was recently rated by Forbes magazine as the number 23 most desirable place to work in the state of Alabama. We're very proud of that. But I'm going to start off with our barriers, and we listened to some of our supervisors, and the number one barrier that we're looking at is salaries, and it's a lot of that is how we're positioning the salaries. When we're interviewing people, when we're at on-campus events. If you're looking at salary, we're not as competitive with the private sector as, we would like to be. But there's a lot of things that we're doing.
Sorry. Can everybody hear me now? So there's a lot of things that we're doing to address this. One thing is we're very happy with our relationship with the State Personnel Department. They work with us, and they've addressed a lot of measures that were really important to us. One is when it comes to our part-time staff, if we're hiring, say, maybe a part-time nurse in a rural county, and they're currently making $20 an hour, or let's say $30 an hour, working 20 hours a week, 600 hours a week. And, in the past, we had to prorate that amount, but now we're able to match the salary, the dollars per hour that they were making, and we can actually add a two-step increase as an incentive for them. But we have a lot of different ways to address it, but salary does remain an issue for us. But when you couple that with our benefits, we feel like that's something that we can do a better job of in the interview and selection process, and when we're on the on-campus events and we're at job fairs and making that known about our benefits, because we do really have some great benefits. And a second issue that we're facing is how do we attract more employees to the Alabama Department of Public Health? A lot of the public doesn't really realize what all we do at public health, and we're trying to really create interest and to educate the general public on what we do, and I'll talk about some of the efforts that we're making there to really develop that pipeline and develop that pool of talent that we can pull from. In the past, we might have pull a register, a state register for a certain position, and there's only 10 or 12 people on that register, but our goal is when we pull that register to have 20, 25 to look at. So addressing the needs to create attractiveness to the department. Another one is Tier 1 versus Tier 2. That's not so much an issue as it was. I mean, if you compare Tier 2 plus our benefits to what the public sector is, we're very much in the game on that. Another issue is that's becoming more and more prevalent is a lot of the students coming out of college are looking to telework, or maybe some type of a hybrid in a telework, where maybe working 2 or 3 days from home and 2 or 3 days at the office, or either they're looking to, or they're seeking to just work at home. So that is a growing obstacle, and a lot of our positions at public health are not compatible for teleworking. A lot of ours are frontline positions where it would just not feasible. So we're looking at ways around that to address that. And some of the things I do want to talk about a few things that we're doing, if you have a couple of minutes just to listen to this. So back in August of 2022, we applied for the Public Health Infrastructure Grant through the CDC, and we received an award in December 1st of last year. And in the award is for developing our workforce, and it's recruiting and hiring, retaining, training, building our foundational capabilities, which is increasing our system, improving our processes, our data monetization, how we collect data, how we analyze it, how we share it. And so we're very fortunate to have been awarded a substantial amount of that grant. But one of the main things that we're doing in it is we're hiring 6 recruiters. And the way the Department of Public Health is configured is we have 6 districts. Each district has 11 or 12 counties each. We have a local health department in each county. And each one of the district recruiters is going to be responsible for recruiting all classifications throughout those districts. They're going to be going to on-campus events. They're going to be going to job fairs. They're going to be developing relationships with academic institutions anywhere from high schools to colleges to HBCUs. And they're also going to be the students on how to apply for a state job, and especially with the Department of Public Health. And the State Personnel Department has a really good guidelines on their website, but a lot of students think that they apply directly with us. And so we're really utilizing, we've hired 3 out of our 6 recruiters, and they've already hit the ground running, and we're seeing a lot of great results with them. Another thing we're doing is increasing our social media presence. And we can actually target certain counties. Say if we need environmentalists in Coosa County, then we can target our social media efforts specifically in that, and we have great ways of tracking. We can track through Bitly, through Google. We can track through our own media sources. We have different software that we use to be able to track that, and we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and we're really trying to hit it hard with our social media presence. And a lot of your college students, when they come into our on-campus events, of course, they have their cell phone in their hand, and so we're trying to meet their demands. And so instead of having a lot of handouts, we'll just have QR codes, and those QR codes are direct links to the actual application at State Personnel Department, and also it links up to our informational pages on whatever they're looking for. We're trying to increase our activity with state interns, with our intern positions. The majority of your Masters of Public Health students have a requirement of 150 to 180 hours in order to graduate to have interns. And we're also trying to reach out to those programs that aren't master's programs in our interns. We're getting so many interest in our intern positions and placing those. And the struggle that we are facing with interns is finding someone to host them. You know, if we are a little understaffed right now, you know, we have to have a host for those interns. We're doing a lot of things, like we're trying to draw in universities. We had, I put together a Public Health 101 day at our facility up in Prattville, where we invited the 3 accredited Masters of Public Health programs in the state, UAB, Tuskegee, and Sanford, and we invited their students in, and we had a really good educational program for them. We had all of our bureau directors get up and talk about what they did. We had tables they could go around, have one-on-one conversations, and it was just a really big success, and we look to build on that every year. So we're doing a lot of things right now to effectively address some of the shortfalls we're having. Another thing that we're doing is, this past week we've completed a targeted evaluation plan. And it's specifically for identifying areas of opportunity in recruiting, streamlining the hiring process, and also to expand our recruiting base. And we've got a lot of evaluation sub-questions we ask, such as, you know, is the new recruiting process perceived to be more efficient or by our recruiting staff? How effectively are we utilizing ADPH's recruitment tools, such as websites, social media? How effective are we circulating information about job classifications? How clear is the application process to applicants, which is really important? To what extent are recruiting events drawing full-time employees? And then, you know, what percentage of our interns are we converting to full-time employees? I think that's a really important part. We're seeing more and more need for interns, and one of our human resource staff members went to a COPA meeting this morning, and a person from Troy University spoke and mentioned that it increases a student's chance of getting a job by 50%. if they have had internship experience. So we're really trying to approach it from that aspect as well. But just bottom line, salary is certainly an issue with us. Attracting new employees, how do we attract those employees? Where do we create the interest of them? And also overcoming the barriers we might have, such as teleworking and hybrids of the teleworking. So those are some of the major ones.
I've got a couple of questions. Sure. On the forecast of what you've got now with your workforce now, how many people are in the next 3 years retiring, in that age group to retire?
We actually just conducted a needs assessment survey, and it projected 29%.
That's huge.
It's very big, yes.
It's huge. And you don't know what the average age, if they're retiring just when they can, or if they're going to stay?
I don't know the average age. I have a little bit more information. There's a national survey called Public Health Wins, which is Public Health Workforce Interest and Needs Survey. And it's conducted by the Beaumont Association, and we participate in this. And one of the things that with public health, the national public health employees that or staff members that were satisfied with their job was 79%. Within our department, it was 94%, so we're well ahead of job satisfaction. But the things that we're seeing is the number one reason for leaving is pay. Number two is work burnout. A lot of that is obviously COVID related. Back, we call it BC, before COVID, our turnover rate was, we had about 12, we were losing, we're losing about 12%. Then after COVID, it spiked up to 21, and we're down to 15. So we still have quite a bit of ways to go with that. And also the survey showed that 1 out of every 3 public health workers suffer from 1 or more symptoms of PTSD as related to COVID. So a little information. I kind of rambled on your question, but.
That's all right. I got one more question.
Sure.
And the grant that you received, just
Yes.
out of curiosity, are you going to be able to keep those people? Is that money going to be, you know where I'm going with that?
Yeah, I sure do. And that was a concern. It's a 5-year grant, and the grant itself is for $61.5 million, and it's over a 5-year period. And a lot of that grant is to retain people coming off another grant, the ELC grant. I don't know if you're familiar with that one,
Maybe.
with the CDC. So we're projecting that either an extension or either that they'll there'll be another grant that we can apply for at that time, but we don't know. That's unsure.
I was just curious.
No, that was a big concern.
Yeah. Go ahead.
This is kind of related. I've been hearing that there's a real problem with people coming in Alabama, going to our medical schools, and then immediately leaving the state. They're filling up our medical schools, and they're not staying here to provide health care.
Yeah, we are seeing that. We're actually seeing that internally. We'll have people work with us a couple years, train, have it on their resume, and then may leave to somewhere where they're going to have higher salaries, getting the experience. I couldn't tell you the data as far as those leaving the state, though.
In listening to you talk about the activities with the interns in the schools that you've started with, and you're going to expand upon that program.
Yes.
I would hope you would expand with all of the medical schools in the state of Alabama. And I was at an Excel in Education conference, which I thought was interesting, and I found out some of our schools here in Alabama from the K through 12, mainly high schools, they were starting what they call health resources and CNAs and so forth, of training them. Emory University and the private hospitals were sort of bringing those children for summer youth programs. And a lot of those kids, they had data to show that they were returning to Georgia to work in hospitals. I thought that was a pretty good idea. And I know that UAB was there as well, and they're now starting a program here in Alabama. And I would think that a lot of those medical students and also those that are in high school could perhaps be a pipeline that we can start working with.
Yes, ma'am, and that is so true. We actually had 3 medical students intern with us earlier this year, and we're looking to place more. But your point on the high schools, I think that's an area that we really want to address and really educate the high school students of, careers in science and in public health. And a lot of your high school students aren't aware of the things that are available for them. And that's one thing that our recruiters were hoping to accomplish with these positions is to, address that with the high schools. I work closely with UAB, and I'm actually on the steering committee with Emory on the Region 4, and I've heard that.
So you're aware of that program?
Yes, I am. Yes, ma'am.
But, and again, I would hope, I'm going to follow up on the pro tem's question. I would hope that we would work pretty vigorously with our hospitals as well as our teaching institutions here in Alabama, particularly for me, University of South Alabama, because they're getting ready to build a new medical school. So I'm hoping we can fill those classes room and get doctors into Alabama that will stay.
And a lot of this grant that I mentioned, the Public Health Infrastructure Grant, affords us that opportunity to use those funds to educate, recruit, and hire. And we're looking at setting up subrecipients, having contracts with the hospitals or different. Baldwin County, Mobile County acts separately as the Alabama Department of Public Health, and we just recently worked with them to develop a contract to address their needs down there in the Mobile County area, and some of theirs might be targeted towards hospital. I'm not really sure exactly what they have, but yeah, we are in the early stages of exploring that.
Hey, the question I had, I guess, going back and related to medical school, wouldn't the students leave from a residency? I know they go through medical school, then they make a residence selection. Doesn't that have a big impact on how people end up in the community, or what fields do they end up practicing and making decisions to stay at Alabama or either come back to Alabama after residency?
Yes, sir, it would. I don't have the information. I don't. Dr. Clark Brown with our department would be able to be the one to be able to answer that question, but I can certainly follow up for you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, just one follow-up. What are the starting salaries for the Mobile Public Department of Public Health? Is there a range for when coming in?
With the Mobile County, I don't know what their range is. Very similar to ours, though, and ours are actually published on the State Personnel Department.
Well, you listed that as one of your barriers. That's why I asked the question, is there a range that you have for somebody just starting with you for, say, a physician, nurse, or whatever?
Yeah, there's certain ranges. Depends on what, I guess, what classification they come in, whether it's what their experience is with nursing. We have usually about 24 different steps, and we have a program that we do have available for us, and it's called Above the Minimum. We have usually about 24 different steps, and we have a program that we do have available for us, and it's called Above the Minimum. If, say, a nurse is currently working for a hospital or wanting to come, they can provide their current paychecks, and we can try to match whatever our steps are with theirs, in addition to a two-step increase. So they might come in at step 12 versus step 1. If someone is coming right out of college or right out of nursing school, they would start in step 1, but we could bring them along and higher step based on what their current salaries are. We can match those.
Good.
And we have so many different, I think we have 160 different classifications in our department, so.
Are we doing anything to recruit out of state? Are we doing anything to recruit, our sistering states are doing anything to
Yeah, in
advertise?
Georgia, the CDC does have a website, and we post job listings on that. And I know we're recruiting in Georgia.
Okay. You know, we're so close to Florida down in your area, you know, and the sistering states, even abroad, there's a lot of people leaving
Right.
California and other states coming here. We would love to be able to reach those kind of
Now, there is
entities as well.
There is one of our partners, or actually one of the state CDC's partner, and it's the Association of State and Territorial Health Officials, ASTHO. I don't know if you're familiar with them. And they do have a site now that's available where we can actually post job listings, and it would be all the way across the country.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
I got one question. We started the conversation with saying you have 300 vacancies.
Yes, sir.
Is that staying consistently 300, or is it growing, or is it being reduced?
Over the last couple of years, it's reducing a little. It was probably closer to 500 about a year and a half ago, and we had some high turnover right after COVID, a lot of burnout. But we have been able to replace a lot of those. We're headed in the right direction right now, but we do have a ways to go.
Well, does it seem to be the number one barrier is salary, or is that just
Yeah.
one of?
That's just one, and one is really attracting employees. attracting the different people to the different classifications we have. Some of the harder to fill positions are the nutrition series, environmentalist, our epidemiologist. Epidemiologist in the state of Alabama, if they just travel north to Tennessee, they can start out about $10,000 or $15,000 more annually than they can to us. But if they travel east to Georgia, we actually outpace Georgia on their salaries. And when we do salary surveys, we actually look at all the surrounding states. We look at what the private sector is paying. We look at states that might be comparable in size to ours, maybe South Carolina, and we try to get as accurate a view as we can on what those positions are making at other states, and we want to make sure that we're at least at that mean level when we're comparing ourselves. We might remove the outliers such as Tennessee and other of the. I think Louisiana is one of the outliers too that we remove. But yeah, we do compare our salaries to others and also for the private sector.
One final comment. The state of Alabama's benefits
Yes, sir.
are superior to just about any other, particularly the private sector. So it may be a communication problem that we communicate how good our benefits are. It offsets some of the reduction in salary.
And yes, sir, and thank you for bringing that up. I actually train interview and selection to all of our supervisors, and I do spend a substantial amount of our time in educating our supervisors. We have about 600 supervisors that are conduct the interview and selection, and we have to do a better job of communicating. We are doing a better job, because when you bring benefits into the picture, we're comparing apples to apples, or we're even ahead of the game.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you very much.
Move on to the next one. Nick, I know I'm going to be on the spot, Nick Moore. Have you questions? This was brought up.
Yes, sir.
In our mic's not on. Nick Moore, thanks. It was brought up this weekend, somebody had said, and I may have been somebody in the committee, that they want to do a mandatory dual enrollment for all schools. Is that something that's possible, or talk to me about that?
I think we've got very strong dual enrollment and AP options, and I think what we've got to do is make sure that every family has the right information to understand what's the best option for their student.
Right.
Making sure that we have dual enrollment available for all students, make sure there's not waiting lists, and that also that there is a handoff from secondary to post-secondary. We don't want to see any students that take a course and that doesn't articulate to their next level, whether that's their career pathway, if they're going to go right into the workforce, or their post-secondary opportunity. So I know we've got the community college system here, and they could probably speak more to the options that are there. But for a student that can take an AP course and make a 3 or higher on the exam, in some cases, if they're going to be going to earn a bachelor's degree, they may want to do that. But if they're going to go into the community college system, or if it's just better for their career pathway, dual enrollment might be the best option.
Yeah. So is it offered in all schools now?
It's offered in all schools, but
They're not all participating.
there's not enough resources to cover the demand.
Well, we need to work on that then.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. I know you had to leave to go to another meeting, and I just wanted to ask that before you left.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any
It
questions?
just simply takes money.
It takes money. That's the only thing.
College system will tell you.
That's right. Everything's funny when their pocket's full of money, isn't it? Charles Tremblay. YMCA. Charles, are you here?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Thanks so much. Glad to be here. I'm Charles Trammell, and I serve all the YMCAs in Alabama and Mississippi. I live here in Alabama, just outside of Hoover, between Hoover and Helena. This has been my home for 25 years, and I've been in the Y for 37, so I know the work pretty well. I'm not a child care specialist, but I want to talk to you today a little bit about our work in child care and the importance that it plays in this workforce development initiative. So we'll share a little bit about that. We are on your side when it comes to trying to work on this whole issue. We've been doing this work for decades and decades. About 95% of the kids that are in our programs, from preschool all the way up to our middle school kids that we teach and serve, 95% of those, their parents are in the workforce. That's been our focus from day one. When people come in that want to just have child care and lay around, we often don't have space for that. So our focus has been exactly on this. I'll share a little bit about the foundation of the Y just very, very briefly, and I won't keep you long. But the Y started in 1844 in London, England, when one guy working in a department store looked around and saw young men getting in all kind of trouble. Some of these guys were coming in from out of town, from the country, and they were getting in all kind of mischief. He saw a need and he met a need. Fast forward from 1844 to 1850, the first Y in Alabama opened in Selma. That was our first YMCA. They celebrated their 150th a few years ago, and I was able to be there for that great occasion. This work is not new to us. 165 years later, we're still doing this work, still serving Alabamians all across the state. And it's not just boys. We serve boys, girls, men, women, young and old. We really are there to serve everybody. In Mark chapter 10, Christ said that he came to serve and not to be served, and that's kind of been our motto, is to kind of follow that and service in our community. People that are involved with the Y, they don't have to be believers, they don't have to be Christians. We're here to serve all, so that's a key part of our service. We've got about 100, well, let me back up. We've got about 16 associations that are across the state, and in the back of your flyer that the committee have got, you'll see that distribution. We kind of cover the whole state. We've got about 47 locations, but the important part that I want to bring out is actually where we serve, where we don't have buildings, where we don't have tools to do it. We partner with others to serve in about 100 different locations, and that's a huge part of what we do. So we don't go into any of these endeavors thinking we're the only ones to try to serve, and we want to partner with others to do it. We've got a long history of meeting family and community needs. A lot of you probably know the Y from health and wellness, or basketball, or youth sports. Swimming, we're the largest provider of swim lessons in the country. That is part of what we do. We even do Parkinson's recovery programs, cancer recovery programs, diabetes programs, so we're into a lot of different things. But the key topic for today is around child care and workforce development. And we've been serving this particular program area for decades, literally. As a matter of fact, when we, let me tell you real quickly what we did during COVID. We were basically told we had to close like everybody else, and we did for a short period of time. But we worked really, really hard to make sure that we could get back open for our child care centers for first responders, healthcare workers, et cetera. And every YMCA that had the opportunity and the ability to do that reopened as soon as possible to meet those needs. So getting back to our start in childcare, and I'm kind of dating myself, so you may remember back in the early 80s, there was a song that Barbara Mandrell had that she said she was country before country was cool. Well, we were doing childcare before childcare was cool. In the 70s, when moms started getting back into the workforce or getting into the workforce, there became a need, and the Y, as often we do, we stepped in to provide that need. Today, we know that childcare is an absolute must-have for the workforce. Families actually need it and demand it. Lori Patterson, who runs our Chilton County YMCA, she shared a story recently that because she's in Clanton, her families will drive from Clanton to Montgomery or Clanton to Birmingham to work, and traditional childcare would not work because they couldn't get back home in time to pick up their kids. So the Y provides that program in Chilton County. So our work is not all in urban areas. Just want to make sure that that point is known. We serve about 7,100 children from preschool all the way up to our school-age kids. We focus on quality and affordability. And when there's a gap in that affordability side, we actually go out, our volunteers, our local boards, and every Y has got a local board, we go out and raise dollars to help scholarship those that can't afford it. And again, these are working parents. We're not doing this for folks that aren't doing anything. So that's been our focus. We often, we're probably giving out $5+ million in our own scholarships from dollars that we're raising in-house to serve these folks. I mentioned earlier that we partner with others to do this work. We partner with schools, with churches, municipalities, cities, hospitals, just about anybody you can imagine. We will partner with if it means that we can do our mission more and better. We do not have to be the lead dog on every hunt. We are here to serve and happy if we're just part of the process. And that's why it's beneficial for us to just share a little bit with you today about our work from the child care provider perspective. I'll close with 3 quick thoughts. Year-round child care is critical for 2 critical reasons. For those that are seeking employment, they have got to have child care. And I'll tell you, preschool is an area where there's a huge gap, and it's a challenge for us to do. Of all those 3 separate areas of child care, preschool is the one that we have the greatest challenge even making work. And it is a huge challenge. But it's critical for parents seeking employment. Also, it's really critical, and we're seeing this every day, critical for retention of existing workers. The mindset of, well, I'll just stay home is fairly prevalent at times, and it is a real challenge to keep people in the workforce, much less try to get new ones in. So we see that as a big issue, and school-age child care is a must. Another factor is that the business case for child care, both for the providers and for the parents, is a really challenging one. Parents, for example, battle this thought of, is it worth me getting a job when I'm going to be spending all that money to pay for child care? And is it really worth that investment? And that's a legitimate question for them to ask. For us as providers, we have trouble filling slots. We've had to limit, in some cases, limit the number of kids we can have in a program, not because of space, but because we had trouble getting employees to work and do those things. The other part is just the sheer economics of child care. The margins, the reason you don't see a lot of for-profits doing child care, particularly school-age child care, is there's not much margin in it, right? I mean, it's just a difficult business proposition to make. we have a hard time keeping costs down even in our work because both inflation and just the pressure to raise wages has put the squeeze on everybody. We're continuing to do the work and plan to continue to do work. And that's the last thing I want to share is that we know all of this. We've known this for a long, long time, but we're here to serve and we're going to continue to do this work. If there's a way for us to be able to help and support, we want to be able to do that. And if you keep this one thought in mind, when school is out, all of our Alabama YMCAs are in. We're open when schools are closed, and that's our hope. We're going to continue to do that. Thank you guys so much for your work that you're doing. I know this is not going to be an easy solution. It's certainly not going to be a one-step solution, but if we can support and help, we're happy to do it.
We appreciate the service, appreciate you coming down. I'm sure we've got a few questions. I've got a couple, but,
Okay.
you know, I'm familiar with it because on the Montgomery County Commission, we gave to the Y for Cleveland Avenue and other ones, you know. And,
Right.
And on the state, how much do we give is in the budget to help y'all?
Yeah, from a statewide perspective, we don't have any statewide giving. There's some local Y participation like you're describing.
Right.
That's critical too, but it's tended to be, that's kind of the eye of the needle. And so
Y'all get federal grants.
we do get some federal grants and that are run through. So they're basically, if a child's in a program, we get funding at times from federal sources to do that as well. We did have one recent contribution from the state, from ARPA funds, that was very helpful to help us begin to, it's a one-time thing. It's certainly not a recurring thing, but we're very thankful for that.
On that one-time thing and the money that you receive, of course, it stays in the state. And now those 7,100, all those that you're counting are in state, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Supplemented, people that are unable to pay. You have those programs. We had it at Cleveland Avenue.
Right.
Can you explain that, and if there's stipulations, how they qualify?
Sure,
And-
sure. It's a local-wide decision. Each Y's got a local board, so they kind of set their own rules. But basically, if there's someone in need, very often a mom, for example, comes up and needs childcare, there's usually a range, a salary range, and it's a percentage off based on that salary range. That varies from Y to Y. Nobody gets anything for free. We learned a long time ago that to just offer things for free is, you don't have any buy-in, you don't have any tie to really their commitment to it. So our commitment has been everybody pays something, and that range is usually above 40%. So.
Representative Anthony Daniels has a question.
Sure.
Representative, are you there?
Gotcha.
Can you hear us now?
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Several government how deputies tender or program. I'm just here.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can't hear you very well. If you can try it one more time or text it to us. Text us the question, maybe. Yeah. We can't hear you now. Try it one more time, Representative. Just call him.
Yeah.
All right, Anthony, we're going to call you and get, Jay's going to get that question and we'll come back to you. Anybody else got any questions?
I have one.
Sure.
Go ahead.
You said when school's out, you're still in.
Right.
What are your typical hours for childcare at your facilities?
Yeah, it varies by facility. Some provide before school care. For example, parents have to go in really early. Kids may get to the Y as early as 6:30 in the morning. So others that don't offer the preschool, the early morning, childcare. Those kids may just come after school, so it varies. Preschool is typically an all-day program for working parents. After school is typically just after school. And when I'm talking about summer camp a minute ago, we're not talking about going off to camp for a week. We're talking about full summer childcare that's just a day program.
Typically speaking, how late does childcare run at your facility?
Typically 6 o'clock.
in the
6 o'clock typically is the end. Some do a little longer based on their circumstances.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Trimble, have you, and I'm sure you have, like many other places, have suffered greatly? Because I know where I am from, we once had about 4 Ys in Mobile.
Right.
And we're down to 2 now. And I'm a supporter of the Y.
Right.
And not only because of the workforce, but I'm also, it helps us with youth violence, and that's something I've been preaching for a long time. Can you tell us what is the loss for the Y? Because I'm told even from the 2 that you have open, they're operating with a very, 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 very short budget.
Yeah, the margins are typically pretty tight regardless. In Mobile, we've actually got 3 locations for the Y of South Alabama, and the Dearborn Y is another Y that does fantastic work with children and seniors. Right. So your question specifically was around the sustainability of those?
Yes,
Yeah.
and the loss, because, you know, one of the ones that closed, the Downtowner Y, served a large amount of people, and it's closed now, and it was in our western Mobile area.
Right.
And I was told by the director there they were closing because they were losing so much money.
Yeah, that's...
So I want you to talk about the loss, because you need money to be able to operate these facilities.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, both of those facilities, one Downtown Y in Mobile closed because when COVID hit, folks weren't coming back downtown, so they had less than 100 people a day that were coming into the Y. And the board decided, hey, the better utilization of those dollars is to invest that asset in a different way. So that was the rationale for there. In West Mobile at the Huron Chandler branch, that Y was in need of about $4 million worth of repairs to be on par with what's needed in the community. And again, the board decided that that was the best case, was not to reinvest there. They do look at programming and serving in different ways, though. So the plan and the hope is to serve more in that area.
All right, I've got Representative Daniels' question.
Okay.
What are you doing for the footprint in central Alabama, the Black Belt area? What are you doing to develop anything new or?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, Selma, I think my first 10 years here in the state, I spent at least 10 trips to Selma every year because our whole point was to try to maintain that operation, and we have done that. And it's taken the cooperation of some lenders for us to be able to do that, to make that happen. But our commitment is to that area. They're actually operating right now from a management standpoint under the Montgomery Y, even though they still standpoint, them partnering with a larger and more stable Y provides a lot of stability for them, and that's proven to be the case for the last several years. So I feel really good about the direction that we're going there with regard to service.
If you would reach out with that, with Representative Daniels and.
Be glad to.
Representative, can you hear me? Well, anyway, if you would reach out to him and if he has any more questions and.
I'll make it a point to.
Any more questions? Yes, sir.
I guess the question I had, just from the standpoint of all the things, why do you think we do have a child care issue, in the state?
Yeah.
What do you think is the reason?
Well, I think it's from many fronts. One is most families are requiring 2 people to work at this point to make ends meet, which puts that demand there. When you look at the operational side of this, it doesn't make a lot of business sense to be in that business, and that's why it's mostly not-for-profits that are involved doing that work, with a few exceptions. So that really is the primary challenge. The business case is so tough. So from us, it's a real commitment to us. We invest about $22 million a year every year into youth development programs across the state. Now, those aren't numbers that I direct. Those are local Ys. We just collect that data from them. But our commitment to youth development is strong. But the ability to give legs to all of that, we could do a lot more with additional funding, no doubt. Yep.
Do you have problems getting and retaining employees
Yeah, we do. The getting more than retaining. Some of our programs, like our counselors that work in after-school programs, et cetera, those tend to be college students, those that we know are going to be part-time, and that churn is somewhat expected. But even that has been a challenge, because when they can go to another a for-profit or even another not-for-profit and make $25 an hour, that's the challenge, is just being able to pursue and retain that. So that's where the business case has gotten tough, and we're aware of that, and we're finding ways to work through it. We're having to give up some other things to keep this commitment, but we feel strongly about it and plan to stay in it.
Are you participating in the co-op programs in the schools?
We co-op with schools with regard to, very often we'll run programs in the schools.
Right.
And we do that in a lot of locations. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, well, more like, I guess, lifeguards or maybe whatever the case may be, you know, be a senior, maybe certified for a lifeguard or, you know, something to that.
We're beating the bushes in every electronic and manual and personal way you can imagine.
Awesome.
Yes.
That's great. That's good to hear. Any more questions? Mr. Leader, it's good to see you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Arthur Ray, Department of Labor. Sorry, we had,
Yes, sir.
yeah,
Good afternoon.
he was our judge, the honorable.
For a short period of time,
Yes, sir.
given election vagaries. My name's Arthur Ray. I'm Assistant General Counsel with the Department of Labor, also Director of Governmental Affairs. We are extremely excited to be here today. A lot of folks don't know a lot of the things that we do because we are federally funded to 90% of our budget, 90-something% of our budget. And our biggest program is one of the few things that people do know that we do, and that's the unemployment compensation system. But we do a lot more than that. We do a lot of industry and workforce-related work. Again, it's federal dollars that are drawn down through WIOA and other programs, but we then do workforce development with that. We work with veterans. We've just now put in a program with incarcerated individuals reentering the workforce, and the statistical studies that I'll share with you in a minute show that that's an area that is subject to growth, that we can possibly bring up our labor participation rate by engaging those folks. We have the career centers all over the state. There is probably no one here or joining us through the ether, if you will, that doesn't have a career center in their district. They're all over the state, and they are there for people to, first of all, walk in. If they don't know how to use a computer or don't have access, we help them access, and then we match them in our job database. The career centers do a multitude of things, but for our purposes here today, that would be the one that's most germane. What I wanted to share with you is it may not be necessary to reinvent the wheel here. Another of our divisions that no one knows really anything about is LMI. It's called Labor Statistical Information. And every state workforce development agency usually has one of these divisions. We do, and South Carolina does. Interestingly, South Carolina has already been through this process. There's a number of states that have, South Carolina, Georgia, some other southern states. We chose South Carolina because it's very demographically similar to us. Whether it's by population size, population breakdowns by race, gender, median income, whatever statistic you want to look at, South Carolina is very similar to us. Well, they've already been down this road, so we thought, let's take a look at it. And what we found, we want to share with y'all because hopefully it'll be helpful. The very first thing you have, and I can't help it, I'm a lawyer, so of course I marked everything as an exhibit. And the first exhibit that you have is Exhibit 1. It's a 2-page document. On the front of it, it has my chicken scratch on it, but that's the actual website for the South Carolina Department of Employment and Workforce Task Force on this issue. You cannot get there by clicking through tabs. Unfortunately, they'd already pulled it back or whatever, but you'd have to get in the search bar and it'd be a nightmare. So I just put the web address there. on the front in my handwriting. And then page 2 of that is what you would see if you go there, and that is a list and, more importantly, hyperlinks. Just click and you go to whatever report is referenced there or whatever item is referenced there. Under the meeting for March 23rd, 2022, you'll see it says white paper data analysis. That's going to be your exhibit 2 today. And that's something you will be able to click and go to. I've only put highlights to that in your packet. But if you want to read, and it's lengthy, but if you want to read the whole thing, great information. But obviously we don't have time to go through that kind of a thing. One of them 78 pages, another 60. I hope you'll appreciate it. I did not print it all off. But that white paper and that analysis is exhibit 2. The meeting on October 31st, about mid-page, the South Carolina Workforce Participation Final Report. That'll be our exhibit 3. Again, only the highlights, I promise. And then the meeting on December 9th, with the long title of a literature review and decomposition analysis, blah, 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 will be your exhibit 4. There are some excellent data synopses there that we can look at, but I will not torture you with the full reports, I promise. South Carolina underwent this, and in about February of 2022, they produced the first report, which was your exhibit 2. Exhibit 2, the Palmetto State flag symbol on the front, is their attempt to quantify where they were with labor force participation. They did the American Community Survey, which is drawn out of, if I remember correctly, it's either Census Bureau information or something, but they took a survey and they analyzed their data, because back in 2022, they were at a 57% labor force participation rate, the very labor force participation rate we're at now. They went through and they broke down the next 3 or 4 or 5 pages are breakdowns of statistical data. Again, I won't torture you with going through each one of them individually, but when you get to the 9th page, if you'll find the one that says prior research Ohio, it's after all the graphs. Ohio did this as well in 2020 and came to some conclusions. And there's a synopsis of those conclusions here now on this page. Things like recessions also lead to temporary declines in labor force participation. However, during the Great Recession, which everybody refers to as the 2008-2009 recession, there wasn't the bounce back that there was before. And they posited that there wouldn't be a bounce back from this one absent affirmative action, some kind of activity aimed at raising that rate. They found that younger adults have lower rates of participation than those age 25 and older. They found that individuals age 55 and older could be a prime target for increasing labor force participation rate. And the largest pool of individuals outside the labor force were those with high school diplomas or the equivalent. The smallest one was those who are formally educated with bachelor's degrees or higher. Again, it helps direct the effort of what we're trying to do. A significant number of non-participants reported having a disability, but not one that would keep them from entering the workforce. Again, an area that may be right to look at, people with a temporary disability, not a permanent one. Anyway, you can read that for yourselves, but that was the work in Ohio, and it can also be instructive here. The next case study is Japan, and the only thing I'll say about that is, and again, you're welcome to read it, because they don't break things down into a state system. This was all their federal work. Of course, they're a parliamentary system, but it was all at the national level, and it was basically geared towards women in the workforce, but to our prior speaker's point, dealing with child care, so, you know, some national legislation on child care, et cetera. Again, based on the subject matter, that might be instructive as well. After that, you have a page called Takeaways, and this Exhibit 8 is a statistical breakdown of what they found on their initial survey of reasons for not working at the time the survey was taken. And this was done between, let's see, the survey period was December 29, 2021 to January 10, 2022. And they're out there outlined in the graph. Did not want to be employed at this time, 3.4. Caring for someone who was sick with coronavirus, 5.7. Caring for children not in school and daycare, 5.5. The most significant numbers are that they were sick or disabled, 9.3%, or retired, 44.2%, or, and then of course, inevitably, and quote, other reason at 21%. But again, that gives you subgroups that we can work with when you look towards workforce development, how to get people back in the workforce. Again, I encourage you to go to the website and read the entire report. It's very instructive. Your Exhibit 3, and this one just has a state map on the front of it. This coincides with the South Carolina Labor Force Participation Final Report under their October 31st meeting. This then was their attempt to have a group do a statistical survey across the state, Milan Chicago LLC. They mailed out surveys to folks that they identified as not working in the workforce. They used the unemployment register and other data points in order to find these people, mailed them out, as you can see from the very first page, to hundreds, about 150,000 people, results from 6,000, pared it down to the number that they wanted to take the survey. And in that, they were then able to develop a graph and a set of data for people who actually were not in the workforce. So it wasn't speculative. It wasn't about what somebody thinks may happen. It was an actual database survey of these folks. The third page, and thankfully they actually numbered their pages in this report. So about the third page in there, your page 24 at the bottom left-hand corner, talks about barriers to getting a job. Low pay jobs, 23%. Health, 20%. Gaps in employment history, something I had not thought of before I saw this data. Gaps in employment history, 19%. Lack of transportation, 18%. Optimal hours not available, 16%. Disabilities, 15%. And I can go on. The interesting lack of child care is in there at 14%. Criminal record, 11%. You know, that goes to the reentry issue. The next one, barriers to getting a job by gender. And then after that, race. And getting a job summary on page 29, obviously there's some differences in, I guess the most obvious one would be barriers to getting a job for gender, lack of child care and staying with the child. Females had 19 and 18%, the men didn't even respond with a registerable percentage. Make of that what you will. Race, obviously there were some differences, but on page 29, the barriers to getting a job summary lists all the things that were listed in the graphs, but by composite. Low-paying jobs, gaps in employment history, optimal hours not available, lack of transportation, and disabilities. Again, areas that would seem to be right for looking at. Back to work factors. I thought this was instructive, and so I included it. It's page 30 in their report, the next page after the summary in this condensed version that I've given you. Back to work factors. Respondents indicating their current work status is not working available were given a list of factors which they could select, as many as they believe to be important factors to getting back to work. Again, high-paying jobs, 51%, flexible working conditions, 49%, location close to home, 48%, flexible hours, 44%, and then it takes a nosedive. And so those are your top four. And then it takes a nosedive into single percentages, things like losing benefits, getting a job offer, reduction in current income. These were basically your top four reasons. The next page, back to work factors, numbers selected.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
You're talking about low-paying jobs, and somewhere in this I read where college-educated people have much higher workforce participation and much lower unemployment records. So they're saying they're not working because they can't get paid enough?
Now, they didn't do it, they didn't do an explanation. Unfortunately, they didn't do like a definitions page where they explain terms. So when they say high-paying jobs or lack of high-paying jobs or higher paying in these surveys, it's unclear exactly what I thought the same thing. I said, what exactly do they mean by that? Unfortunately, they didn't do an index that explained it. It's not that I could find.
And we've got the report. Let's just kind of touch over because we got a lot of other things too. But I do have one question when we get through, or I've got a question. Go ahead.
Sure. And that's really it for that report. There's an appendix A that breaks down some things, talking about, whether people are actually looking for work, what sources of income do they rely on if they're not working, and those are all there for you. The very last one, Exhibit 4, the literature review and decomposition, I promise you, is statistically dense and quite frankly, a nightmare to read. But I included it because on the very last page, and I just used the synopsis, the first 4 or 5 pages, they talk about policies and strategies for increasing labor force participation. And there's some interesting stuff here. Improve labor force reentry for former prisoners, expand policies that help people balance employment and caregiving, support transportation projects that connect workers in rural areas to urban areas, so forth and so on. I'll note down at the very bottom, they talk about tiers of counties. What they're really talking about is they segregated their counties into poorer counties, more affluent counties, and then average income counties. But they talk about in the second bullet point at the very end, bridge the gap between jobs and workers, in addition, workforce centers strategically located for job seekers. That's one of the things we do. And that's something that we've been aggressive with since the pandemic. Making those career centers multi-stop, come in, hopefully with the idea that you got interviews by the time you leave. And that's a central part to our workforce development and reentry system. Again, I apologize for going so fast. I know it's very dense. It's a lot of information. The website is well done and has links to all of this information. But again, it just occurred to us that we could share this and maybe it would help. It would help with what y'all have to look at. If anybody's got any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
So this commission's been working on it since 21, right?
That's correct, yes, sir. And I believe, and it's unclear to me whether or not their legislative session is a fall or spring session, but I think that the last thing, and it's not linked on the website yet, but I've been trying to research it, I think they're getting ready to draft some legislation in response to all this data.
So basically, they've been working 2 years. I wonder if they've moved the needle any today. Ma'am, I'm sorry.
Stand up so we can hear you.
Yeah, we people online can't hear you.
I know that they allowed their Illinois Shop 6 employees and they increased information. They changed their wage record reporting in the state to include.
I tell you what, I'm gonna have you come up, Mike, so Danny and Anthony Daniels can hear. Before we get to that, though, you can come on up front and have a seat, but did anybody have any questions for?
On the move the needle question, just so you know,
Yeah.
They have, in fact, they've lost a tenth of a percentage since they were, their rate was 57% back in 2020. Ours is 57 now. Their current September unadjusted is 56.9. Now, keep in mind, they just passed the legislation,
Right.
but I guess the answer is the studying of it didn't change anything. Now, maybe the legislation will.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Leader, let Mr. Leader go. He raised his hand if you don't mind. Go ahead, Mr. Leader. All right, go ahead.
No, I'm just curious, and I'll go back and read this, but when you were talking about the regression analysis.
Mr. Drummond, is your mic on?
The regression analysis on page 3, and it said 0.06% for rural counties. Did they identify what type of jobs? And I think this one is referring to manufacturing jobs in rural areas. Is there somewhere in the report that South Carolina identified where those deficits were and in what counties when they did their survey? Because I don't see.
Right. Which exhibit are you on?
Exhibit 4.
Exhibit 4.
On page 3. And my question is, did they identify in those counties, since they went county by county and looking at poorer counties?
Right.
That was the participation rate in South Carolina for, I gather, poorer counties or rural counties?
That would be my understanding. Any more fleshing out of that, they would have done in the appendix.
But did they identify what those jobs were?
Oh, what the jobs were?
Yeah, and I think this one cites manufacturing
Yeah,
employment.
I don't remember that.
I'm just wondering if they found any value in, since they broke it down county by county
Right.
with the participation rate, did they sort of identify what type of, jobs went to those particular areas?
I will say in this one, when you go on the website, this particular study, you will see some cross data where they take a map of South Carolina, and one of the ways that they look at the data is by sector. There's some that are obvious, race, income, gender, but then you'll see one that says, and it's kind of like there's a manufacturing, two sections that are kind of manufacturing hubs. There's another section that's more agrarian. So I think there is a map that speaks to that. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm just wondering if they utilize, like the Department of Commerce for us, to help work through this data to come up with the legislation that we need to move the mark, or for them to move the mark.
I don't know because I hadn't seen their legislation, but I would suspect so.
Yeah, and we can drill into it. We can go on and look. Any more questions?
Sure.
Mr.
Yes,
Leader.
sir.
Real quick, assuming that our numbers are compatible with South Carolina's, in your mind, in your profession, what's the percentage of disabled?
That can work but are not working. Yes. Well, being a stats nerd, I hate to guess. I'd rather have a percentage.
28%, you think we're about the same?
Yeah, I would think ours is similar. And then the question, like I said, becomes how many of those people are kind of permanently disabled and out versus temporarily disabled and subject to coming back. But obviously you'd want to work on the subgroup that could come back, re-enter the workforce. I wouldn't hazard a guess. I don't know what the percentage is.
And another quick question, if you had a silver bullet to fix what we're trying to fix, what would it be?
Oh, geez. I mean, just the issues that South Carolina found, everything from childcare to transportation to, I'm not a legislator. I don't pretend to know what the best ways to legislate solutions to those are, but I think at least this helps us identify the problems that people face re-entering.
Yep. All right. Tim.
It's such a multiple faceted problem because I work around a lot of these people. So many of them are drawing Social Security disability, so they work for cash under the table.
Yeah.
So they can keep getting their SSI, their foods, their WIC cards, their phones and everything else. But then so many of them, we've trapped them with our social safety nets. They can't get a job paying enough money to get over the hump, to get an apartment, to get a car. The government has raised the price of cars to the point of absurdity, and they're going higher now. I mean, what's the average price of a car going to be? $65,000 here pretty soon? To get an apartment, you have to pay 2 months rent up front plus a security deposit. That gets into thousands of dollars people have to come up with. You can't make the transition from government assistance to your own sustainability because we've raised the barriers so high to enter the job market. They can't do it. I know a lot of people that would rather be working, but they can't give up their disability, their food stamps and everything else to transition over because they can't find a car to get a job, a better paying job.
Dice on it either.
You can't roll the dice, yeah. I mean, we've thrown the safety net on top of them and we hold them down. And it breaks my heart because I see these guys every day. They'd work, but they just can't afford it.
And I will say, and talk about anecdotally, based because of what my wife does, we go to different places around business folks at BCA. You talk to Alpha folks at the Farmers Federation. And I hate talking about what I do for a living because I think it's boring to most people probably. So I always ask people about what they do for a living in their business. Do you know that when I ask farmers, everything from farmers about trying to get folks in a chicken house to work, to business owners trying to get somebody to show up for work on a production line, you know what the most consistent answer I get across the board about why they can't fill positions is literally, I can't get anybody to pass a drug test. Shocked me. I had no idea. And what I was told was, hey, you know, when our dads went back to the house after work or whoever, they drank a beer. Now these kids are going back after going to work and they're smoking something or ingesting something or whatever. And they say, now this is purely anecdotal, but it appears to be an issue.
Yeah, it is.
And we have the opioid committee sitting down
in room 200.
Yeah, in room 200. So anyway.
Any more questions? I appreciate the report.
Yes,
thank
sir.
you for bringing it to us, and thank you for your time. And I'm gonna be
Anything
in
we can
touch.
do to crunch those numbers, or with LMI, if we can produce any information for you, we're absolutely happy to do it.
I want that young lady up here and see what she has to say. State your name if you would. Come on up so everybody can hear you, please.
My name is Michelle Tatum. I'm the LMI Director at the Department of Labor. They just passed this bill, and it's the 2023-24 session that they passed the bill. They, came to the same conclusions, a lot of socioeconomic problems. One of the things that they are expecting to come out of it is
Do you have a bill number?
Yeah, Tara just sent it to me.
If you will, move closer to the microphone.
Okay. I've never been accused of being quiet. That's interesting. I think it's A67/R84, H3726. I can send it to you if you'd like, and then you
That
can
would be,
distribute
or send it Jade or Tara.
They did request that there be a dashboard developed that showed the labor force participation rate for South Carolina. We can do the same thing. I've already got one started. I started a decomposition analysis, but regression analysis is a very time-consuming thing. I haven't gotten, I haven't completed it all, but we can do the same thing for Alabama. I don't think we're going to find anything all that different. A lot of the problem is the aging population, older people with the population, or the civilian non-institutional population being the denominator. We can't change the population. But that's part of the problem. NAFTA put a real hit on it. When our manufacturing employment that's gone down, we don't have any more textile anymore. Well, where did those people go?
Yeah.
Hyundai, brought in our manufacturing, brought that back up, but textile workers, not many of them went to work at Hyundai. So that's still part of a problem. I've done a little bit of analysis about what happened from the people working in 2008 in Alabama to where they're now. And there's just a big churn. I mean, we've had a lot of people that just left the state. I don't know where they went. But then we've had a lot of people come into the state. So enhanced wage records would help that. We would be able to know more of an occupation of what these people worked on. And that's what part of their bill did, was to add the occupational code to the wage records. But that's more work for employers, and it's going to be something very difficult to sell to employers. So.
Anybody have any questions? Thank you so much. I just got texted this. I find this interesting. Somebody just texted this to me. Let me get it up. Vermont did a study, and a single parent has to go from $27,500 a year to $67,500 before their standard of living changes from government benefits. To go from, isn't that amazing? Anybody else? Any questions? Next, we're going to hear from Christy DeGraffenreid from Nursing Home Association. Welcome.
Hi, guys. How is everybody? Okay. I won't take a lot of time, but I was asked to come talk about some of the specific problems we're seeing in the nursing home industry. Let me start off by saying we've got 229 nursing homes in Alabama. We serve 27,000 residents, and we generate about 57,000 jobs. Tomorrow, if I had the people, I could hire 1,500 nurses tomorrow. Okay? That's just nursing homes. That's not hospitals, that's not home health, that's not all these other things that we have. So y'all remember that. I got a call about a month and a half ago from Peggy Benson. She runs the Board of Nursing for the state. She does a great job. Peggy surveyed all the nurses in Alabama to kind of get a snapshot of where we are. Okay, in the next 5 years, we're going to have 39,000 nurses leave their employment. They're going to let their licenses lapse. In that same 5 years, they predict we'll replace that with about 32,000 nurses. Okay, $7,000 person deficit. Now, you add to the fact that nursing homes could hire about 1,500 nurses right now. Hospitals could hire about 6,000, probably more than that. So you add the 7,000 whole to the 7,500 current shortage we have, we'll be short 14,500 nurses in 5 years. That should give everybody in this room great pause. That's going to affect your entire healthcare system. Sure, I'm here to advocate and talk about nursing homes, but if nursing homes don't have the staff to take people in the hospital off the hospital's hands, it backs up the hospital. It's all synergistic. Now, they also found that the average licensee in Alabama used to let their nursing license lapse around the age of 54. That's now gone down to the age of 46. Okay? Peggy and I both think that COVID kind of burnt people out, guys. I mean, we went through a hard time. Everybody did. But nurses and people in healthcare really did. So they're kind of getting out. And young people aren't necessarily attracted to the healthcare sector like they used to be. COVID did affect that. We've got to work on changing that mindset. All right, so nursing homes has seen this coming because we knew the silver tsunami was coming, right? Not only will we be taking care of those people, but those people are out of the workforce. The silver tsunami is here. But we're just beginning to see the crest of that. Now, let me give you some positives, okay? Nursing homes and other healthcare people have been seeing this coming. We started the LPN standalone program. Representative Garrett, it's $2 million that comes from the ETF. The reason y'all need to understand why LPNs are so important is, I'm sure y'all know this, you have nurse practitioners, RNs, and LPNs, and CNAs, okay? That's kind of LPNs are kind of the lifeblood for nursing homes, have been for a long, long time. Now hospitals are starting to want LPNs too, so that just stresses the system more. So 3 years ago, our ETF chairman decided that we would incentivize community colleges to start back up programs that just concentrated on LPNs. Y'all, for the last 3 years, given $2 million to that. That's been great. We started a nurse apprenticeship program like what we do with manufacturing. We were the first in the country to do that. We should be proud of that. The community college system helped make that happen. They worked really hard on it. It's great. Last year, y'all passed legislation for the nurse educator loan repayment system, which I know is a big mouthful, but as I've been digging down into this about nursing, part of the problem is the community colleges get people that want to become nurses, but they can't take them all. The reason they can't take them all is because they don't have enough people to teach them. All right, you got to have a master's level nurse to teach a nurse. So the problem becomes we got to incentivize people to want to teach, even if it's, part-time. So you guys passed a bill that said we could start a loan repayment program to incentivize nurse practitioners, people like that, to teach. We haven't funded it yet. And I know everybody talks about money, but I just want to let y'all know, we got to fund it to incentivize these nurse educators. We also started something called a MAC program. That's a medication assistant certified. I don't want to get down the weeds, but it's somebody that can help pass out meds at hospitals and nursing homes because we knew we didn't have enough nurses. We also started the healthcare task force. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you talked to Senator April Weaver about the healthcare task force, but I think it's important. So many of y'all are working on so many initiatives. They've come up with some things. They're going to recommend some stuff to you guys, to leadership, legislation we can do. So just keep your head up for that. I ask that you support those things when it comes through. Now, I will tell you, there's some other positives. The Board of Nursing just passed a curriculum for dual enrollment. You guys were just talking about dual enrollment. Now in the state of Alabama, a student can start as a sophomore taking college classes to become a nurse. When they graduate high school, they only have to go one more semester and they'll be an LPN. Now that's fantastic. That's very innovative. Of course, they're going to be a young person. We're going to have to mentor them. Y'all know that. I mean, it's healthcare. We got to make sure they're mature enough to handle it. But I tell y'all this to say this. The $2 million you've been giving community colleges for standalone programs, we want to try to increase that to 4. I know it's money. but they're going to spend it. They're going to put, hopefully, another $500,000 into supporting the OPN standalone. But the other $1.5 million will go towards scholarships to pay for those dual enrollment classes for kids that want to become a nurse. So it's actually targeting that money towards that population. So I would ask that y'all consider it when it comes up, and I, of course, will be lobbying y'all about that when the time comes.
And I've got to ask a question.
Yes, sir,
And
sure.
We're educating these young boys and girls to be nurses, but we need some kind of, I guess, clawback to make sure they don't become a traveling nurse, and we need them injected into your,
Yes, sir.
you know,
Yes, sir.
your expertise as well as our hospitals. So, you know, you're losing a lot of them that way. Am I right?
Well, we did during COVID. Yes, honestly, Mr. Chairman, it did happen a lot during COVID. And we got in a lot of bidding wars.
Right.
It's just supply and demand, right? I mean, simple economics. But I will say this, the travel nursing thing has calmed down some. Okay, I know that was a big buzzword around COVID and all of us heard about it. I'm not willing to say that there's any kind of magic bullet legislation. I know y'all are asking for that to approach the travel nursing situation. We certainly don't want to make, tell a citizen you can't work where you want to work. But I understand these programs I'm talking about, maybe there's ways we can incentivize people to stay in the state.
Well, if we were to do as a loan or some type of being able to them apply for and we give the state money to it, that we can say, we're going to pay that loan if you stay in Alabama and have a job in Alabama. I think we have thought about that. We talked about that, didn't we, Chairman, a while back, a couple of years ago? Danny Garrett? He may be asleep.
We might have lost him. He looks
But
frozen.
anyway, that's something that we have talked about before, but we're
Yes,
going to have
sir.
to work on something to make sure we keep these students that we're spending the money on and incentivizing them to be able to stay here in the state of Alabama.
I agree.
And I know the hospitals in our area, in the Baldwin County area, and I think Mobile as well, they are doing that. These young girls going to South Alabama and Coastal Community College, if they'll sign with the hospital will actually pay their way for nursing school.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, they do have to put some skin in the game, but I think you have to sign a 5-year contract that you'll work at the hospital, which is helping the hospitals, and it's also helping the students be able to go to school, some that would not be able to afford to, that are really bright young men and women.
Yes, ma'am, I agree. And, nursing homes do that as well. We have scholarship students. I can tell y'all right now, if you know somebody in your sphere of influence that wants to be a nurse, call a nursing home in the area and they'll scholarship pay their whole way. I mean, my guys and my women, they are working very hard to try to scholarship students anytime they can. Yes, sir.
I can barely hear you. We're hearing every other word, so we can hear you now. Yeah, but we can't see you too good. We got your ear. Jade calling. Hey, Chairman, hold that thought 1 second. We're having a hard time hearing you. They're going to get you on the phone. Just a second. Okay, all right.
Real quick, are y'all having the same problem with nursing homes closing in the rural counties?
Well, we've been able to hold on, but I'll tell y'all this. When you don't have the staff, you can't take the residents. So we have nursing homes that have closed down wings, because they don't have the staff to properly care for those residents.
So you are.
We're okay right now.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, we're all right.
All right, go ahead and ask your question, Chairman.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so what I want to mention was on the Lieutenant Governor's task force that's looking at, this joint task force that's looking at the workforce. One thing we're going to recommend is that we have a quarterback for all the workforce development initiatives around the state, because we have a lot of different silos going on. They all need to be coordinated under the same strategy and make sure they're working together. So that comment was mentioned earlier about different initiatives. We had a lengthy discussion about the nursing situation at our last meeting. And also I wanted to, she mentioned that Senator Weaver had been with her task force a couple of summers ago. I was at a conference with Senator Weaver, and we heard where other states were doing some very attractive things to attract nurses out of Alabama. And so she made a note about that. And so one thing we need to do is not only is keeping those nurses here in the state. So I think what we've done in the budget lately has been trying to address that nursing shortage. She's correct that it's a big potential catastrophe if we don't going forward. And I think we're going to continue to do that. And I think that Senator Weaver has a lot of practical things from her task force that we're going to need to consider as we address that issue. But everything, the funding the last several years has been intentional, and I think now we have better clarity about what we need to do going forward with that. But those are great points. It's a very important issue for the state.
Thank you, Chairman Garrett. I appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, I only have a couple of more points. I don't even have to.
Yeah, keep moving forward, please.
You had asked what we need to do, what the silver bullet may be for general, in general for employment. I think we have to do a PR campaign about why you should live in Alabama. I mean, I think that we need to sell Alabama.
I think you hit the nail on the head.
As a place, we talk about our housing is affordable here, just different things that maybe a young person doesn't know.
Low property tax.
Low property, I mean, I don't know. I just think people don't really get it. And I think young people I used to be a school counselor. I think a lot of young people think, the grass is always greener, but we export our most natural, our best resource, that's our kids and our people.
I think we've done a great job on economic development, but you look at some of the kids that are getting out of college, they move to Tennessee and Atlanta because there's more things to do. Maybe we need to look at doing more Top Golfs and that kind of things, in different parts of the state. But you're right. On selling Alabama, we've got a great state here. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I can say this too, Innovate Alabama, the Innovation Corporation is focused on rebranding the state and specifically attracting the younger person to stay here. And part of the selling point is going to be a communication and a PR campaign and a more user-friendly information about the natural resources we have in the state, because a lot of the rock climbing, kayaking, biking, golfing, all the things you mentioned, Alabama has so much more to offer than so many other states. We just have not done a great job branding it. So that's part of what the Innovate Alabama is actually going to be doing very proactively.
That's awesome. That's good. All right. Anything else, Chairman? I guess so.
Mr. Chairman, there's one more initiative you may not know about, and Nick's gone now, but are y'all aware of the talent triad that Nick Moore's doing? Y'all are aware of that? Mm-hmm. So I think that's another great tool. So as you're getting those different, groups together, that talent triad has the capability to dip down into the high school age, even all the way up into the adult age. And I think there's a way to build a framework to help. So I just mentioned that because we're working with them as well. But thank you for your time.
Any questions? No, thank you for coming down. Sorry it's taking so long to get to you.
Oh, it's okay.
But we will be in touch. We're going to need your wisdom. All right, next. Who'd you say? Let's see. Rosemary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. At our last meeting, I told y'all that I was going to do another survey and really drill down from small business owners on what they're looking for employees and the things that they are hearing for employees. So the survey went out this afternoon at 2:30. So hopefully at your next meeting or the following meeting, I will have those results. I did ask for comments, and I will tell you that my members are pretty vocal. I will not share with you who said what, but I think they will be honest and forthcoming about things that they are learning and hearing about as they try to hire people. Also, I will say that just as a reminder, 99.4% of businesses in Alabama have fewer than 500 employees. So we are truly the ones that hire those people, even though the big announcements we get. If you look at all those small businesses that would hire 1 and 2 people even every 6 months, that adds more to people in the job market than a big announcement makes, and you don't have to pay them to come here because they're already here. So I look forward to sharing those results with you. I will say that if other groups want to use that survey, it's not proprietary. You can take off the NFIB at the top, but I think it would be interesting to hear from other cross groups if they're getting the same kind of information that we're going to get.
I think so.
All right?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Donnie, let's see here. Hold on. Let's see. Okay. Josh with Coastal Community College. Josh, are you still here?
Yeah, he's here. Josh Duplantis.
Josh.
That's your neck of the woods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's the one that made it.
Good afternoon.
How are you guys?
Sorry to keep you waiting so long.
No worries. I will, I'm gonna get the presentation up just to walk through, but I appreciate being here, and Representative Gibbons invited me to come, and I guess for the last 4 or 5 years I've been running around South Alabama trying to help make sense of this problem in our region, and really just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things we discovered. I think most people have probably covered everything I'm going to cover, so I'll be brief with it, but I've been in the labor market business for a long time. I grew up in the labor contracting business, and can remember calling oil field employees in South Louisiana in the mid-90s to go on hitches, right, when I was 13, 14 years old in the family business. And I've done that pretty much my whole career, now serving as Dean of Workforce at Coastal Alabama Community College. So I work in towns like Gilbertown, and then the next day I work in places like Gulf Shores and everywhere in between. So it gives you a unique on-the-ground look at labor participation and some of the challenges we're facing, a lot of them, which you guys heard. So, and really want to dispel some things that I hear on the ground as we look at labor participation. One of those is that 57%, right? So if we're at 57%, what's the best practice? And I can tell you guys that the best state in this country is Nebraska. Highest labor participation rate in the United States of America, right? 69.2%. And so I always try to keep that in the context of kind of where we are in our state and kind of where we need to go. And you've got that data in a packet that I brought for you. And really, when you look at it, I like to see the big picture of labor force, and I've got some stuff in there where you can look at really what labor force participation has done since 1945. We were sitting pretty low as a country, and then you can kind of see our boomer generation, right, 80s, 90s, start to rise, more women in the workforce than ever before in the 90s, and really since that mid-90s, United States labor participation has been plummeting, right? A lot of reasons behind that, a lot of reasons that we'll kind of cover very, very briefly. And you can see kind of as I go through on slide 6, if you take a different look at it and really look at it since the mid-90s. And I always say you hear a lot of phenomenon about why that is what it is. I like to say a lot of it was that latchkey kid phenomenon, which was me as a kid, right? Get the key from the house under the Virgin Mary because both parents were working. First time in American history. Since then, we've been in a decline. If you look at slide 7, you can see Alabama's labor force participation rate. It really does trail that national average. There's a concept in economics called shift share, right? And it's how alike or different you are than national trends. So if you think about the concept, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? Lowering tide sinks all boats. For the most part, we rise and fall with the national economy, right? Alabama's lagged about 5% behind for 40 years. That's kind of the reality of where we've been at a labor participation rate standpoint, right? One of the things I always say too, when you have people looking at labor participation rate and how it's kind of defined, a lot of times we focus on that 16 to 64, and like my friend Donnie will tell you, it goes if you're still working, doesn't matter your age, as long as you're still working. I think sometimes we forget about looking at prime age participation rate and where that difference is. You can see that in your charts as well. That usually sits about 21 percentage points apart, right? The difference between the 16 and 64 number and the 25 and 54 number. So I can tell you in Baldwin County, Alabama, 83% of folks 25 to 54 participate in work. It gives you a little bit different perspective as you kind of looking at this labor participation issue, right? So we know right off the bat, you've got some challenges on the front end, and we've got some challenges holding people in the workforce. And so as you look at that, and there's some data in there about the spread, of course, I'll look at it locally a lot, Mobile and Baldwin County, and in our entire region. If you work in Region 7, where I come from, there's a coastal economy, and there's a north of the Delta economy. And those are totally different, right? All the numbers change, labor participation changes, and everything. One of the things I want to point out, I even included that in the presentation, is a little blurb that I caught earlier this year out of Nebraska, right? Best in the United States of America. Population growth needed to address labor scarcity. So there's some trends here that we're going to really struggle to kind of get our way out of, and you kind of see that the best state in the United States from a labor participation standpoint still publishing. They're having meetings like this just like we are, right? And again, you can see that spread between labor force and then prime age labor force. So again, we always know youth employment's been plummeting for many years now. I'm sure most of you, like me, the summer job, right? Go talk to your colleagues now who have teenagers. It's going away. We got to introduce young people to work, and that's shown in the data, right? We got to get people to hang on a little longer as well. So, and you just look at it over the last 6 months, there's been a lot of national data that says our labor participation rate's going kind of flat. The corresponding to data is that we've been riding the backs of immigrants in this economy, right? Both in Alabama and the United States of America. I think the immigrant workforce is going from 17% to almost 19% in the last few years. So as that stays flat, it's really staying flat because of that influx of labor we got coming in. And you've got some data there that kind of shows that. And really, say a lot of people kind of stole the thunder, but it is the things that we've been talking about here. Is the demographic drought, is the individual barriers to childcare. We see that everywhere. It's quality jobs. Representative Pringle, you said it perfectly, right? I mean, there's so many people caught in that issue where the job is just not enough to get them off the benefits cliff. And that's real, and we see that every day. The skills gap, market alignment. I can tell you at our college, I ask every one of our programs, tell me the skills that you are teaching through your courses, certificates, and degrees. Because that's becoming more and more important. And you see that in the marketplace, right? Organizations are dropping degrees pretty quickly, but they're asking for the skills that they used to think, they used to assume that degrees gave you. And we mentioned the talent triad and Nick's work there that aligns with that. And not just in our market, but everywhere else, it's housing, right? If it's not affordable, it's either not affordable or it's not accessible. A lot of times both. I know it's a challenge we face in Baldwin County. And if you look at it, speaking of that demographic drought, one of the things that I always like to point out, and this is the data points that we're not going to get away from, and I think it's on slide 12 in your packet. You can really just look at the shape of the graph that I provided. Our population has kind of gone from a youth heavy, right? In 1990, you can kind of see our working population that was holding up the retirees. And this country's turning into a middle-aged balloon, right? Somebody mentioned Japan earlier. They're about 20 years ahead of this trend than we are. They say by 2050, their economy might cease to exist because everybody will be too old to work, right? Most forecasts say America is probably 20, 25 years behind that. But still a serious challenge. You can kind of see that. Of course, retirements, bring in some data about that. And COVID spiked that, sent a lot of people home. We were averaging 2.2 million retirements in the U.S., went up to 4.4 million between 20 and 21. That trend is going to continue in 2022, 2023, pretty much guaranteed. And now about 50 million Americans are sitting on the sidelines due to retirement. One of the interesting things that I talk about, labor participation, 16 to 64, right? Average age of the retiree in Alabama, anybody want to guess? I usually bring t-shirts when I'm talking about this because it's not the most exciting thing. But it's 61. We say that all the time, the economy down in South Baldwin County. There's articles about it, how people can move from higher price and get them a nice beach house on Ono Island. Well, they're retiring at 55, 56, and guess what? They're not going back to work. That's counting our labor participation rate, right? Average age of retiree in Alabama is 61 years old. And that's some definitions that I don't know that anybody knows now, but I know this committee and I know everybody's going to be talking about in a few years. And that's our dependency ratio, right? That's to measure the person's age 65 and older compared to the working age population. Above 50% is a big red flag, right? We said about 30 right now, both in Alabama and this country. 10 years ago, that was at 20. And you can look at the curve in the next slide that I put on slide 16. Really, really cranked up during the 08-09 recession. So remember that word, because we're all going to be talking about that more so in the next 5, 10, 15 years, our dependency ratio. And again, residents over 65 as they compare to the people that are still participating in the workforce. And you can just look at the sharp trend and see where that is headed. And again, one of the things I always talk about, replacement rate. Huge deal. And if anybody want to guess, the last year we replaced ourselves in this country, meaning that for every 2 people, we had 2.1 children. Anybody want to take a guess at that? I already gave you a pin, so you already got my prize. 1973. Wow. 1973, right? Only 2 ways I know to get workers. You either make them or you bring them in. And we ain't made them in a very, very long time, okay? I've got 2, so I'm 0.1 short. Dog don't count. And you can see, just some more data in there that I want to provide for you guys, just to kind of bring some context, to that, just to look at the percentage of our population in retirement, and it's skyrocketing very, very fast. A big problem, and I started to see this in higher ed probably about 10 years ago. I've worked at 5 institutions now over the last 22 years, and I can tell you, I love to walk around campuses. I love to talk to students. I eat lunch with them. I stop them in the middle of the walkway and ask them to tell me about themselves. And I started seeing the young men disappear. I mean, just disappear. And that's also been the case in the labor force. Labor force participation in men since the mid-90s has been atrocious. And when you really look at it, the loss of men since the 08-09 recession, because what suffered in 08 and 09? Construction and manufacturing. A lot of those guys never ever came back to the workforce, right? They're sliding out, working in service jobs part-time, not getting picked up in the data sets that we all look at. Okay. Serious problem, and I wanted to bring a book, but I also on page 19, and we've already talked about this, and Representative Pringle, you did too. There was a guy who wrote a book called Men Without Work in 2016, and I read it because I'm that nerdy. This is before COVID, and after COVID, I said, golly, I'm going to go back and read that book. Well, he reproduced it and said it again to start looking at how that effect is. And you start looking at the data from 1985, and percentage of full-time men who work full-time on one or more means-tested benefits was 11%. So in 2013, same number. Men working full-time on a means-tested benefit, 27.2%. All that data is there for you to kind of look at. As you talk about the benefits cliff and you talk about all those things, that's the data that supports you making that argument that's all too real to people, right? And like everybody talked about, there's some data, childcare, huge issue. It's hitting larger American cities faster than everybody else. We know that's an issue everywhere. We've talked about that. I don't want to belabor that point. We've talked about the opioid crisis being such a significant thing. And I'll tell you guys, I put on a slide there on 21 for you to look at some research. So I went out and found that Google Scholar's 10 highest research articles on how the opioid crisis has affected the workforce, right? And I read them. It's boring. But what I came out with was that decline in men over the last 15 years, you can attribute between 25% and 44% of that decline to the opioid crisis.
Really?
10 studies. I got those numbers from 25% to 44%. That body of knowledge is new because the academic community is just starting to kind of get a hold of that and start to research that. But that was from kind of the top 10 cited studies on the opioid crisis and how it affects the labor market, right? So in large part, there's some challenges there. We saw a spike in 96 with the launch of OxyContin. 2009, 2010, another huge spike in opioid crisis due to the recession. And obviously, it's no secret that in 21, 22, another large spike. And when it spikes, it does not come back down. All right. So, and I know Nick left, but I want to remember back in 2018, 2019, there was a task force in the state that looked at that and said in the Alabama economy, at that point, we could add 66,000 additional workers to our workforce if the opioid crisis didn't exist. Okay. Huge. Quality jobs, quality wages. We got to talk about that all the time. Again, I tell you, I cover 9 counties, fastest growing county in the state, some of the fastest shrinking counties in the state, in places like Wilcox, right? I talk to a lot of employers. You talk to a lot of that are still paying $10 an hour, right? Nobody's going to choose to do that job. It's just not going to happen, right? So I love it when we talk to employers. I'll always pull the MIT living wage calculator because I think it's a great indicator. It'll tell you exactly how much a family needs if it's one person with a child, 2 adults working. And that's in that packet too, even their formula and how they come up with what is a living wage, right? We always say that. We want to provide training programs to help folks have a family sustaining wage. We got to know what that is, okay? We talked a lot about skills-based hiring, and we talked a lot about housing. Housing continues to be an issue. Representative Givens to tell you it's a big issue for we know in South Baldwin County, we bring in 8.3 million visitors a year. We contribute $8 billion to the state. So that's what they leave behind. It's all taxable income. A worker in our hospitality industry can no longer afford to live anywhere close to work. That's our reality, right? Even if it is accessible, it's not affordable. Other places it may be affordable, but not accessible. So you can see, there's a lot of other states making a move here in a lot of different ways, and that's kind of outlined for you. A couple solutions, I think some things that we've done that have worked on the ground, we've gotten very micro with data. I can tell you, it's taken a lot of work. We got a team of folks that do this kind of in Mobile and Baldwin County. We can tell you labor participation rate for every zip code in our community. I know there's communities in Baldwin County, there's communities in Mobile County, where when a young person gets up and walks around his community every day, 7 out of every 10 people he sees do not work. I always say that about some of our career awareness stuff, right? And sometimes we got to back up and before we tell them to go work in aviation, maybe we need to create training programs to tell them they just need to work, right? Because they don't know what that is. They don't see it in their communities every day. And so, it takes a little work to get to. We're certainly doing that in our region and can tell you per zip code. We can also compare that to median household income, the percentage of those young people that are in single parent homes, percentage that are uninsured, right? To start pulling pieces of all this together to realize what we're dealing with and how we kind of solve these problems. And of course, one of the things that we've really been working on, and you guys have said it with the post-secondary issue, that has hit home for me. In Baldwin County, I walk the floors of Foley High School a good bit, Robertsdale High School a good bit. Both schools, Foley right at 20% undocumented, right? 17, 18% at Robertsdale. I walk, I see these kids, great kids. Seen some have 30 on their ACTs. I can't serve them. Coastal can't serve them. Saw a young lady the other day, it's a dental hygienist in Robertsdale, provides bilingual services at a dentist's office. She had to go to Pensacola State to get her education, all for that same program in her backyard, right? We have 2 gentlemen own an HVAC company in Central Baldwin County. Both got an associate's degree in HVAC, Pensacola State, right? They come over into our high schools, they feed families, and they bus kids over to go and get an education there. That number's in the hundreds. In fact, the exact numbers are in your packet because we went down and kind of found that. So, again, that's another solution when we're looking at us. We look over to go and get an education there. That number's in the hundreds. In fact, the exact numbers are in your packet because we went down and kind of found that. So, again, that's another solution when we're looking at us. We look at issues like housing. We've got hundreds of kids. That number's in the hundreds. In fact, the exact numbers are in your packet because we went down and kind of found that. So, again, that's another solution when we're looking at us. We look at issues like housing. We've got hundreds of kids. And have a pillow to lay on somewhere. And we're just from people in the community. A lot of them go to Pensacola State and pay with cash. So that's just a couple of things, y'all. Dissertation study, a nerd about this kind of stuff. Look at how this unfolds, but just wanted to take a few minutes to answer any questions that you may have.
In the room as well, still patient rate calculation includes or does not include undocumented workers?
They'll count them if they get resident alien status, right?
Do you hear that, Danny?
So say that again.
A lot of them, they'll get resident alien status, and at that point, to my understanding, that Representative Garrett on the phone.
Yeah.
I know that in some cases, they get that status and they can get a tax ID number. And that's why you see a lot of, if you go to a lot of high schools, especially K-12 folks have figured this out, it's easier for that population of undocumented. You'll see entrepreneurship curriculum there, right? Because
If you would pull that mic a little closer, he may be able to hear you better. That's good.
Yes, sir.
Right.
So you see a lot of entrepreneurship because it's very hard for them to go to work for somebody. It's very hard for them to go to work at Austell, right? It's actually easier for them to start HVAC service, right? Which is very interesting when you start kind of looking at how that population survives in our economy. And we all know, it's no secret that a lot of them are kind of working under the table, and we're not capturing that. We need to be to get a better understanding of what we're looking at.
Exactly.
Very good question.
Did I answer your question, Chairman?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I don't know where to start, but I've got a lot of questions. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to drive to South Alabama and meet with you when we got more time. But I'm going to allow the commission to start asking.
And my cell phone's there. I drive a lot in that Gilbert Town and Gulf Shore, so call anytime.
There you go. There you go. Anybody?
I would like to get this in an email, because I am struggling a little bit.
I had a hard time
This
seeing
is
it.
not
I got you.
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah.
I was hoping to have it on a screen for you guys, but I can certainly get that out there. In fact, don't send the one you have, Representative Givens, because I made a few
If you would
edits.
send it to Tara or Jade and let them send it out to us,
Absolutely.
if you don't mind, that'd be great. I'm gonna tell you, that's great stuff. I mean, and this is what we're looking for. And I mean, you've done a lot of the homework already. That and the South Carolina and everybody else that's presented today, but this is what we need to drill into. And it's shocking to hear on some of these stats, and not a quick fix, but we can be working to that,
Josh.
that area.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
One of the questions I have, because when you made me aware of this, and then I started talking to everyone to find out exactly what happened and why it is like it is. So, my curious mind was, okay, South Alabama, University of South Alabama, wonderful school, but it's like a melting pot. There's kids from all over the world at South Alabama, from engineering to in the doctorate program, whatever. So it was like, how can they come here and go to school, but yet we can't educate these immigrant children that are attending our schools in the state of Alabama? And so I found out they get like a work visa, but they get this visa to attend school in Alabama. So which is the best way, in your opinion, to help these children in the schools in Alabama? Is to change our legislation or to get them a work visa, a school visa, where they can go to school in Alabama? Which is going to meet the needs?
I understand that question. It's a very good question. So every post-secondary institution has to be kind of what they call SEVIS approved, as a designation from the Department of Homeland Security. Our college, we're a merger, right? So years ago, we were 3 separate colleges. We just had to go through that process again and earn that certification. So the difference is a lot of the melting pot is actually coming from other countries, right? Not necessarily living here already. And that is
coming from
the
other
big
countries.
difference. And so, I think that's two different populations, and people want to come here, so I would say bring in that international talent that's coming on that student visa, and let's try like heck to keep them here. But for the folks that are here, I do think we need to open up the opportunity for them to attend post-secondary education. Because one of the things when you talk about from a programmatic standpoint, we partner with the Floribama and Coastal, right? One of the largest restaurants in Alabama, and we've got apprenticeship programs where they'll pay full tuition. And I got to tell kids at Foley High that they can't take that apprenticeship program. Can't do it, right? Because it requires a certificate in culinary arts from Coastal Alabama. So we got to get them access. And we've got stories like that galore. I heard a Robertsdale kid accepted a $10,000 scholarship. They didn't know. They gave him the scholarship, $10,000. Couldn't take it because it was only to an Alabama institution. He ended up at Pensacola State too. That was actually one of the 2 kids that started the HVAC business. Wow. So.
When you fax us or email us the information when you flag it, I'm like,
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, sorry.
Can you also talk about, when you talked about Nebraska, because, you know, I can't see them comparable to Alabama, but, and I guess I also want the South Carolina, if you have that, what is their poverty rate? Because I'm concerned about that social services cliff that we're all on, but I'm also wanting to understand if they understand what the poor endures in their respective state. I think for us to move forward, we gotta understand, you know, I agree with some of the things that Pro Tem Pringle said, but you gotta understand, and you're the first person that mentioned housing. And I don't think people look at affordable housing as a barrier, but it is. So when you send us that, can you send us information on how those states deal with their working poor?
Yeah.
The people who don't work, the working poor, those who can't.
Well, and it's no coincidence. I actually wrote an article that I'll send you. I forgot where it sits at, but really comparing, Alabama's been 5% lower than the national average in labor participation for the last 35, 40 years, right? We also average between 7 and 9% higher than average poverty rate. I mean, those two things are interconnected, right? And that's really what I kind of want to share today. A lot of times we just don't think about it with that much complexity. But you're absolutely right.
Those men that you cited, are they in that category?
I think those men, I think you got it perfectly. I mean, that was just perfect.
So they are.
Yeah, and really, that book, Men Without Work, because that was always a question for me for years. How do they make it? How do people make it? And it lays out that SSI issue, right? And that they go and get that doctorate to improve. And so they've got to, for the men, what we've learned, or, kind of learned studying this stuff, is that the magic number, if they can make $1,800 a month in cash with the SSI benefits and the other things, it equals out to a salary of $56,000 a year.
Wow. Any more questions?
We're really
We're going to be visiting with you a lot. I can tell you that.
Yeah, you've messed up now.
Y'all come on down. Bring Donnie. He always wants to come to the beach.
Yeah.
Because, I'm a contractor, and I watch this. We talk about the cost of housing. 25% of the cost of a house is government regulation. It's all, the government makes people spend so much money on housing and the environmental laws that you've run the price up so high that people can't afford houses. And it's all, governments run up the cost of housing, governments run up the cost of automobiles, governments run up the cost of gas, and government caused the inflation that's biting everybody now.
And the rental housing, to me, it's like $1,500.
I had
15 to 1,800.
I just heard this story the other day. Somebody's laughing at their 92-year-old grandmother moved into a new apartment. They got her out of her house, and she went out there with a measuring tape and realized the steps were not, the run and the rise and the steps were not standard because the housing complex and the apartment complex was old. She made them tear every single staircase out of the entire apartment complex and redo them to the modern standards.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks that was funny. So she showed them, jack the rent up of that apartment complex. And I don't know how we make the difference up when we raise the cost of housing, the government raises the cost of housing, raises the cost of transportation, government raises the cost of everything. Then they want to go tell these business people, well, we're going to make you pay more because we've screwed everything up so bad. We're going to make a small business pay the difference. You can't do it. It doesn't work.
And I would encourage you guys, Representative Drummond, like on that MIT living wage calculator is the best I've ever seen from an algorithm standpoint. I've run it in Daphne, Alabama, and literally I can call apartment complexes and it'll match it. It is phenomenal. And so from an accuracy standpoint, to kind of start to figure out where do we need to get for people to make it, it's a phenomenal tool. I'd encourage all you guys to kind of play around with that tool. If you just Google that, and you could type in your own community and learn a lot about
this. Is great information. We've got to move forward.
Yep.
Guys.
Thank you, John.
One more question.
When you look at healthcare, is that a barrier as well? Nobody's talked about that. But I know for me, when I first got elected, I had a man and a wife come to me, and both of them worked at minimum wage jobs. One of them was a civil service job. The wife worked at McDonald's. They couldn't afford health insurance, and they ended up on that SSI. They're not working now.
Absolutely.
Because they can get, the other benefits that come along. So
Right, and that's exactly your point, which you explained perfectly, right? I mean, that absolutely. Mhm. Yep. Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Appreciate you. All right, I'm sorry we're running behind, but we need to ask the questions we need to ask because y'all drive so far to get here. Donnie, I'm sorry it's been so long to get to you. Mr. Jones from West Alabama Chamber.
Well, thank you. Since all of you are probably brain dead at this point, I thought I would go ahead and share with you more stats. How about that, right? Everyone's been talking about the same thing, but one of the things that I think separates West Alabama Works from a lot of other organizations is the result process that we go through in everything. So what I thought I would do is share with you some stats that Josh has talked a lot about this, and I will tell you, you do need to go see him. But here's the deal. The labor force participation rate is calculated from age 16 to death, not 16 to 64 in the numbers that we actually use in the state. We're starting to look at that 16 to 64, but the numbers that everybody is running around talking about is actually 16 to death. Now, last time I checked, now we won't ask any of our lawyers this question, but we're not hiring a lot of 90-year-olds in the workforce. We're also not hiring a lot of 16-year-olds. We've got to start looking at real solutions to these questions. We have beat a dead horse for so long on unemployment, on participation rate, on all these things, and we have hired as many consultants as we possibly can to give us the same amount of data, and we're not answering the questions of what do we do? And so what I really wanted to do is talk to you about that. But also, one of the things that Josh really honed in on is this livable wage. And that has to do a lot with social services. You had asked that question. And unfortunately, because the way that our printout shows here, we weren't able to do a presentation. That blue box there on the fourth or fifth page actually gives you a really incredible piece of information. So when you look at livable wage, you have to look at livable wage in sectors. And that's the other thing that we're not doing when we're solving these problems. Is number one, a lot of our rural counties actually have single parents. 60% of every child that lives in those counties, 60 to 70% are actually single parent homes. So now when we start answering the question of how do we create more child care, then you have to get very strategic. Then you look at metro areas such as Tuscaloosa, which a lot of people think that Tuscaloosa is a white-collar town because it has the University of Alabama. Actually, over 40% of all employees actually are in manufacturing. So then you ask the question, well, how do we solve the child care problems? Well, most white-collar people would say we build more child care centers. Well, that's $5 to $10 million, Chairman. And then we ask the question, well, will they actually participate in that? Well, if 40% of your employees actually work in manufacturing, and you begin to answer that question, and you actually look at the national studies, manufacturing employees want their child care close to their homes. White collar wants their child care close to their business. That's a whole different strategy. And you say, well, how do you prove that? Well, it's very simple. You can actually look at what happened with Mazda Toyota. They were looking at building a $30 million child care center. I think you guys might have talked with them and Tutris and all the things that they're doing. Well, the problem is what did they end up doing? They said, we're not going to build that child care center because when we surveyed our employees, they said they don't want their child care center, their child care on the campus. They want it close to their homes. So that's why they partnered with Tutris. When you look at Mercedes-Benz, it has a $20 million plus dollar child care center sitting on the campus. The majority of those child care seats are actually filled by their administrative staff, and less than 5% actually are by their line workers.
Is that because of the age of the line workers?
That is because of the way that manufacturing works.
Right.
Most manufacturing companies, when you look at it, they can't leave the line if their child is sick, so it doesn't make any sense for them to be on the campus. They'll have to call a family member, and if you look at, in the majority of Alabama, when we look at how many people drive and how far they drive, transportation's a big issue, right? Well, here's the other issue. There's a lot of people that actually drive, that actually have transportation, that coalesces with the barrier for childcare because they don't want it close to them, because they'll have to call another secondary family member to come in and take care of the family because they cannot leave the line. That's not how manufacturing works. And so when we begin to strategize, when we begin to look at these issues and we begin to really narrow down into that, and we begin to say, what's the average wage in a Greene County, a Hale County, a Sumter County that we work in every single day? And you begin to see why in the last couple of years, over 18 communities, some of the small ones were LA and Dallas, that flew into West Alabama to actually model out our workforce system. When you look at the facts that National Jobs for the Future actually is studying West Alabama as one of 6 sites in the entire United States that actually are putting more minorities to work in manufacturing than any other community per capita in the country. The things that we're doing actually work. And so how do we replicate that? How do we look at the data to actually make serious decisions? You can also see, like Josh said, we actually break the actual non-participation rate down to manageable sectors. So number one, why are we spending time talking about an overall non-participation rate when you actually break it down per individual and you look at age 20 to 64? And you look at the majority of jobs in our rural counties are actually manufacturing and agriculture. They're not white collar, but we're making decisions based on those types of data. But now when you look at that and you see, for example, if you look at Greene County, you begin to look and actually do the math, there's only 2,088 people that are in that non-participation rate. Then you begin to coalesce all of the information that all of these government agencies have been talking about, and you look at those that are justice impacted, and there's over 683 in that small community, and you take that and those that are on SSI, we've talked about those that are on disability, there's over 410 in that one county. So that non-participation rate that we actually think is going to really move the needle only comes down to 995 people. Now, we need to look at every one of those, and we need to get them into the workforce. But the question is, what are these programs targeted for? That's why we did programs like Building Hope, Alabama, which is focused on justice-impacted people. We started that last year, and we have over 1,400 justice-impacted people that we're putting into work. Heck, in the automotive industry, in the last couple of years, we've put over 3,400 people to work directly. So these programs actually work. Matter of fact, a question of minority versus, and we talk about how do we put that in manufacturing in the automotive industry in West Alabama. And our representatives have seen these numbers. We have put more female African Americans to work than you would believe. We have over 32% and sometimes over 40% of females that have been, majority of those over 75 to 80% were actually African American. And those are coming from our minority communities. And so when you look at that, those are key, data points that we have to look at, because when you start narrowing that down and you actually begin to focus on what are the true objectives and what are the deliverables, we will find quickly that a lot of times we're majoring on the minors and we're not majoring on the majors. And you hear all of these programs and they talk about all these things, and we hear all this, but what we have to come back to the bottom line is ask ourselves, if all of this was working, why are we here having this discussion? And as we begin to look at that, we then begin to look and focus, and because that's exactly what we were talking about, is if all of this was happening, then why in the world are we having a workforce issue? And nobody's asking that question. A lot of that has to do with our base. What's going on in our K-12 system? The fact that Josh and their team, the community college system, and our post-secondary neighbors, 60% of the kids that are coming out of our K-12 system have to be remediated, even if we get them into post-secondary. And none of us are asking that question. The baseline, the fact that we have 50,000 high school graduates across the state of Alabama, and we're talking about if we move 1 percentage point in the non-participation rate, that's what we need to be focused on. And those types of outcomes. But it can't be these arbitrary numbers. For example, if we need, let's talk about 10 years ago when all of us in the legislature in the state of Alabama and the business community started talking about how do we move and we've got to fix the graduation rate. And how did we fix it? We just started graduating everybody. That's how you fix it. Those are the kind of things that we have to start having real conversations, and how do you work on those barriers? So let's move on to that. 3 barriers that we talked about, and this is in your packet, and I think it's very important for you guys to take a look at it. You guys have already heard to ad nauseum about the benefits cliff. That's a real issue, and there's got to be a real bridge between that benefits cliff. Right now, we have people that we're putting in work-based learning every single day through our partnership. A lot of people don't realize what's different about West Alabama Works. We're a regional chamber of commerce. We are the regional workforce council, and we are the regional workforce board, all in one organization. So business is driving every single thing that we do and every decision that we make, and it's all result-oriented. It's not about how do we figure things out and how do we have meetings. It's about how do you move the needle and get these things done. And so industry has pushed us in a way that actually has stretched us to do things that nobody else is doing. So when you look at this, we begin to look at the benefits cliff. We begin to see those things. But how do you actually move the needle? Child care. Well, the issue is most of the people that we're getting to work in rural counties are going to go into manufacturing and those types of positions, unless you're in Baldwin County, who has hospitality, but very similar. But the thing about it is now if you look at it and you say, well, if it's in their communities, there's not a whole lot of child care in the Black Belt. When you look at the state of Alabama, we're over 100,000 seats short. When you look at Tuscaloosa alone, we're over 8,000 seats short. So how do you fix that problem? There's not enough money in the state budget to actually build enough child care in the next 4 years to actually meet the budget or the need. So we began to develop a program with the community college system called 3x3, which is actually fast-tracking with DHR and our partners at DHR to actually create more in-home daycares in the Black Belt and in our rural impoverished communities. Now we're taking somebody that's interested, a grandmother that's taking and raising 2 kids, which, by the way, when you look at the livable wage and the percentage of single parents, coalesces with all that data. Taking those individuals, and you can take a grandmother that's raising 2 children, they can put 2 or 3 more children with them. We can train them, set them up with our partnership with Pathway to Success, The Edge, and the University of Alabama and Shelton State, and we can have them in business in less than 90 days, and they can be making over $50,000, creating more entrepreneurship in our rural counties than has ever been done in the history of the state of Alabama. That will move the needle. When you begin to look at the study, if you'll flip over and actually look at housing and actually look at the data that everybody is talking about, when it's talking about housing, you'll find out that somebody right now, and this is a lot of information, and I know our time is short, but if you begin to look at a chart that's on there, you can see that a person that's making $44,000 a year can only afford at an 8% loan ratio with a 20% down, they can only afford a $136,000, $965 house. How many houses in your communities are being built for that price?
None.
Exactly. And I can tell you, those are key issues. And then we say, well, we'll just make more multifamily. But how many of your industries, you talk to an industry and say, how many of the families that you're recruiting for skilled trades and production that actually want to move into a multifamily house? And the answer to that is very few. So how are we actually incentivizing more more affordable, not just affordable housing, but more affordable workforce housing. But the data is in your packet that you can actually see what is it going to take. Those are the kind of decisions that we need to make as a legislative body, is how do we incentivize development of things that are actually going to move the needle? Because if you're asking a developer, do I build a $150,000 to $200,000 house and make $30,000 versus building a $400,000 house in Baldwin County, or a $500,000 house that I can make $75,000, who's the dummy there? Right? And so we have to start making real decisions that will incentivize these types of programs. The other thing in your packet is transportation. So how do we develop transportation? And thinking about more things like ride share and things of that nature is absolutely wonderful. But here's the thing. People in poverty need job security, but they also need transportation security. And the fact that something runs at 7 o'clock in the morning and ends at 5 o'clock in the afternoon isn't helping them when most of our jobs now are in manufacturing, because that's not how manufacturing works. So how do we actually create an incentivized program with our industries that are industry-driven, not benefits-driven? Because if these things are benefits-driven, it's the same problem of reasons that people are not getting back in the workforce. So as we're developing these programs, we've given you an example of Hopped-In that we're looking at right now, which is a company that's out of New York and Canada that actually is doing some phenomenal things to actually bridge the gap of all of the existing, very similar to Tutris with childcare, which brings all of the different resources, church vans, school buses, everything into play, and how do we actually use that to get people to work and help families? So those are the kind of things we have to start thinking outside the box, but incentivizing organizations that are innovative in their approaches, and then instead of looking at those types of organizations as the enemy, actually supporting what they're doing. And that's what we have to do to move the state forward when it comes to the non-participation rate. Looking at how many people do we have in the 20-year-old sector, and what are their barriers? How many people do we actually have in the non-participation rate that are 45 to 50, and how do we deal with that sector? Because what Baldwin County does is not what Tuscaloosa needs to do, is not what Huntsville needs to do. It's the same thing that we talk about all the time when we talk about the federal government making decisions based on what New York City is doing and what California is doing. It's not the best for what's going on in Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia, but yet we do the same things when we try to legislate. We cannot create a one-size-fits-all and move the needle when it comes to the participation rate. It has got to be rural versus metro, not in a they get, we get, who loses and who wins, but the products, the strategies have to be segmented in a way that those areas that are more hospital-driven, financial-driven, like Birmingham, is going to be totally different than those that are aerospace or maritime, like Mobile, and hospitality driven like Baldwin County. We have got to start working on things in that type of thought process to actually move the needle. The other things that we're talking about is our pipeline. And I'm not going to take a lot of time because I can talk, and these guys know it, hopefully on the campus of Mercedes-Benz, and show you what we're doing to transform in programs like Ignite, which is a brand new student-driven program. What better way to get people off the couch than to keep them from ever getting on the couch? So it is an initiative, and the fact that Alabama has one of the highest unemployment rates for students in the nation. We have one of the lowest unemployment rates, which we don't even talk about now in the state of Alabama. But we do have the highest unemployment rate when it comes to students in the work. And then we wonder why when they're 19 and 20 and 21, why we're losing them. It's because they haven't learned the value of work. And so the Ignite program, the Building Hope program, which is putting our justice impacted individuals, when you're talking about the fact that, did y'all know, somebody asked a question about those that had disabilities? Those that are justice impacted, if you look at those numbers, There's studies that say that 50 to 70% of everyone that's in the judicial system has some type of disability. What's the pipeline for that? Why is the fact that we're, as a state, don't require every human being that comes through the Department of Community Corrections be evaluated by ADRS? Why is it that every DHR office doesn't have a qualifier of ADRS? We have more money in the Department of Rehabilitation Services to help job seekers than any other department. We're losing money in WIOA every single year, but yet we have money there, but we don't even qualify a quarter of the people who probably have disabilities. And so we have got to start looking at real processes that actually make a difference and move the needle when we're talking about how are we actually going to move the percentage of the non-participation rate, and really look at what that number is, what those barriers truly are, and not the most important talking points of the month, but know that Greene County's is totally different than Tuscaloosa's, is totally different than Decatur, all of those things. And I'm telling you, we are doing some amazing things in the state of Alabama. But the problem is, as somebody said it earlier, we are so siloed. And we would rather, I think you guys have been in politics long enough, we're famous for a circular firing squad. I'd rather you lose than me win. And we've got to stop that mentality in our state and actually doing the things that matter to help families. Because every one of these numbers at the end of the day, it's not a percentage point. It's a child who's not getting the opportunity that they need. It's a single mom who doesn't feel like she has hope. All of those things are so important. So let's don't lose the fact that everything that we do and the decisions that we're going to make, and I know you guys don't, but so many times us in the profession, we get so bogged down with moving numbers and making percentages and everything else that we forget that every single day we have the opportunity to bring hope to communities that don't have any. And that's what workforce development really is. And so love to have you guys come up and let us actually show you these programs and let you experience it and let you see some of the people and let you meet some of the people that we have transformed their lives and let you actually see the fact that West Alabama and Birmingham has over 30,000 employees that are tied to the automotive industry and what that looks like in our region, and see how that's making a difference in what we're doing in healthcare and construction and general manufacturing. So I'll be happy to answer any questions. I know you guys are tired and ready to get out of here. So thank you for your time.
Donnie, I appreciate you. And I think we're going to take you up on that if it's good with the commission. We're going to come up, next meeting we have, may have it at your facility there and tour Mercedes.
Absolutely. Love to have you.
My grandfather is the oldest existing Mercedes dealership in the country.
Really?
Not the oldest, but he's the one that didn't sell, you know. But anyway, so Mercedes is something I'm pretty familiar with.
Well, and I don't know if y'all saw that in 2027, we're going to be building a new line of car or SUV in Tuscaloosa, and that is the highest production vehicle, most expensive production vehicle in the United States is actually built in Alabama.
Awesome.
So, a lot of good things.
Any questions?
Let me just make, I watch our Department of Education on contract review, and they spend, I can't tell you how many millions of dollars on every, you can't even read the gobbledygook they put in these contracts.
Yes, sir.
And they're not identifying these kids with learning disabilities?
No.
I mean, have you ever been to a prison before?
Absolutely. We actually, just to let you know, we just received a $6 million grant from the Department of Corrections with the Department of Commerce to actually run all of the workforce initiatives out of the Aliceville Women's Prison.
Let me just, you go to a prison and you talk to these prisoners, you will find out that most of them are probably there because they had some type of learning disability. They were growing up in a dysfunctional family. And I want to tell you, they are some smart people. They might not be highly educated, but they are very intelligent. Absolutely. And they're there because nobody reached down when they were young kids. Probably by the third grade, they were lost in our public school system. They had a learning disability that was never addressed. They had parents that didn't pay attention or care about them. And they just got pushed behind.
That's
let's talk about
barriers.
childcare too. Here's my problem with when you talk about these grandmothers. If they enter into a child care arrangement where they're taking care of children during the day, are they going to fall under DHR?
Yes.
See, I mean, I had a world-class, nationally renowned child care center in my district. It's won awards all over the nation. DHR tried to shut them down. They were in the church, and we passed that stupid law about churches falling under DHR. They wanted to shut them down. And you know why they wanted to shut them down? The hand sink they used to wash their hands after they changed the baby's diaper was 3 feet further than what DHR, quote, allowed under their guidelines. So what's going to happen with these grandmothers and Wilcox County want to take care of these babies? Is DHR going to go up there and make them gut their houses?
Well, and let me say this to your question.
Grandmothers you're talking about, they don't get any compensation because that's considered part of their family. They have to be a foster parent, but if they're, because I have a constituent in that category now, and I called them and say, is there any compensation for it was a grandmother and a grandfather who were raising 6 grandchildren.
And DHR's going to come in.
That's exactly what we're doing. And here's the problem that I see in a lot of things. We're sitting down and talking with DHR, and we're saying this is the problem. And one of the things that I have found is, even though you hear all these horror stories, one of the things that I have found with our government partners is if you'll just have real conversations and bring solutions to the table, they're usually willing to work with you. And that a lot of times is the things we don't do enough in this great state. And that's why I commend you guys for what you're doing with this committee, is really listening to people and hearing the issues and then saying, what's the best solution going forward? And that's what we need to be doing more. That's why I want to encourage you guys to really look at the purpose for the regional workforce councils. That's the purpose of the regional workforce councils, is being the advocate for business with all of these agencies and trying to solve real problems. And that's done from a business mind, not a political standpoint, and not from a government standpoint, from an agency standpoint. If we can start understanding who the customer is for workforce development, it's not the job seeker, it's the employer. And we begin to build out models that actually meet the needs of the customer, we're actually going to transform workforce development and education in our state. So thank you guys so much for your time.
Donnie, thank you for coming up, and thank you for your patience mostly. Appreciate you, and we will be in touch in the next couple of days. All right, any further business questions? All right, we're going to adjourn. We were going to come back, but we'll get a group text since we're losing everybody. Thank you.